Doing, Tim? We're live.
Dude, doing phenomenal, man. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, man.
So what is going
So,
on? Tell me, what are you seeing in the marketplace?
well, you and I did a video that went kind of viral on YouTube where we were talking about whether or not people would be able to afford houses in the future. And all the comments were negative. All the comments were that the government doesn't want us to own houses. So I wanted to speak to that and say, is there a conspiracy that the government doesn't want home ownership? And I would argue that it's not specifically that the government doesn't want home ownership, but that the scenario that existed wasn't sustainable on multiple levels. So we could talk about, I think that there's two big areas. There's the federal government and then there's local governments. I think local governments don't want new houses, they don't want more
Right.
people.
Mhm.
And the federal government wanted to wean people off of 3% interest rates, which caused a crash in the housing market. And they also wanted the number of transactions taking place to stop because it was causing inflation. And I apologize for this video feed. I'm having the internet adjusted this week, so if I'm a little fuzzy or choppy, it will be fixed.
It's all right, man. So let's talk about your theory. So number one, this is crazy to tell you this. I kind of agree with you on this one, man, which is kind of a not we don't normally go and agree on things. I know that's the fact, but in this
Yes.
case, I do agree because you look at what's going on in the environment. You're right. We've seen some phenomenal appreciation of housing, and based on all predictions, housing is going to continue to get even better. It's become even more valuable down the road just because of the limitations. So number one, I think you got it. I think you're right on the money. Number two, I think the government recognizes it's going to take time to catch up with the current building, and you and I both know they're not building affordable homes, right? And
Yep.
there's not enough out there. Number three, I'm going to throw this one to you: the silver tsunami. We've talked about this before, right? Which is the silver tsunami is all the older individuals when they're going to finally start selling their homes because they're locked
So
into that
old
two and a half,
people
three
are
percent.
not selling their houses like they normally would. Like they're holding on to their houses with a death grip. They're
Well, think
holding
about
on
it.
to those three
Yeah,
percent interest rates. They're holding
yeah,
on to that
exactly.
value they have. They're like, I'm not selling my house unless I get $1 million. And I want to say that a little bit of that is a little tiny bit of greed. People have, you know, if you own something, you psychologically think it's worth more than what you would pay somebody else for that same
Sure.
thing. That's a thing.
So
And that's happened for so long that I think it's sort of built into psychology now as people like when you ask them what their house is worth, and I think that's always been the case, but it seems more so now, they think their house is worth more than it might actually be.
And so, with that being the case, I mean, think about it, Brian. People are holding back because we're all taught about passive wealth, right? Passive income, right? We're looking at it from the standpoint of I'm older, I may not be able to retire. I'm going to live a lot longer than my predecessors, if you will. And so, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, you know what, and where am I going to go? Where am I going to go to get housing at 7% versus the current 2.5 that I have, right? Or where am I
Yep.
going to get that equity piece, Brian? So I think your conspiracy theory holds some water in this particular case. And I think the
Yes.
government doesn't want to cause a massive rush on housing. They're not going to drop the rates down to like 2% today, right? You and I both agree on that one. Because if they did, they would cause another tsunami of house prices continue to go up, and we have this issue. So I think the government doesn't want you to buy a house at its current pace of purchase. They want to continue to slow down the purse process. They're keep trying to reduce inflation, reduce the price of housing, and allow, if you will, the population to catch up. So that's the question. Why does the government want you to buy houses? It's plain and simple because there's not enough inventory available to purchase, and they're concerned about the long-term impact on wealth.
So most people still believe that there's going to be some sort of a correction. And I would like to do my best to not be contrarian, if that's a word. But I would like to try to give my opinion on why I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
Price is a result of supply and demand. Like it doesn't
Correct.
cost $20,000 to build a Rolex. The reason why they cost $20,000 is because people want to pay $20,000. There's only so many of them, and you can use every other scenario. Cars is another maybe a more practical scenario. So the supply side economics, whatever that was, caused there to be a shortage of cars. Then everybody decided to
Sure.
switch over to EVs and stop making combustion engines and V8s. And then all of a sudden, interest rates stayed low, and the everybody knows somebody who has a story where they traded in their car for what they paid for it 2 or 3 years ago. That's never been the case. I don't remember ever going through life and watching people trade in cars for what they paid for them. So supply and demand drives price. The demand is caused by the number of people who want to buy a house in the housing industry, and that is driven by the number of people in America, like on Earth. Like so, the population has increased, and the number of houses hasn't kept up with that.
Right.
And we
It's a
also
net,
have
net
massive
zero.
immigration, by the way. So that's another like
Right.
pressure on the market is immigration. So we have immigration plus the population increasing, and the number of houses hasn't kept up. That is just one factor. But it's probably the biggest factor. So this is where I don't think there's going to be any relief because the population is not going down, at least for 20 or 30 years. Immigration seems like it's not ever going down. And that's going to cause and the number of houses is not going up. So just simple mathematics says there's going to be pressure from the demand side,
Right.
and
Right.
that there's going to be a lack of supply side. So I don't see this going away.
So let's add two more factors to that, Brian. Number one, the cost of materials never recovered. We had COVID, we had, the supply chain got interrupted in the process of the interruption, material delays got severely pushed back. And in essence, it caused prices of timber to go up dramatically.
Yeah.
Costs
Yeah.
of everything went up. At the same time, we've had to pay people more. We've had to develop different channels. So the cost to build is going up. And Brian, are they making more land?
They're not making more land,
No.
and here's the other conspiracy, and that is local governments.
Correct.
I'm going to just speak to the East Coast. So the East Coast is the oldest part of America. It is the place that has the original city centers were built around ports. So you're talking Boston, New York, Baltimore. Washington D.C. is its own
Port
thing.
Republic.
Yeah, but so the city centers are the economic drivers. That's where the most people live, is in and around cities.
Exactly.
Those areas have a certain number of schools, a certain number of roads, a certain number of police officers, and they don't have a good plan, at least in the Washington, D.C. area, for an increased population. You look at like Annapolis, there's just not any land that I know of to build in. Prince George's County, we're talking like Charles, Prince George's County, Anne Arundel County, Calvert and St. Mary's. Those
Montgomery.
areas have land, but they don't want new houses. They don't have the schools. They don't have the roads. The traffic is the third worst in the country. So let's just use Maryland
Right.
as an example. So the local governments have put in place restrictions. Like as an example, you need 3 acres to build a house. Most people don't even want 3 acres. They'd rather live on a half an acre. I don't feel like taking care of all that. And then the other big issue is the septic systems. They've now decided that they're bad for the environment, and they would like people to be hooked up to sewer systems. But in order to build a sewer, it's like $2 to $5 million. You have to have a certain number of houses to support it in order for it to be economically viable. It
Right.
adds an enormous cost just to the original build of the house, way more than a septic tank.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's just not there. The will of the people is not there. They don't want, not in my backyard is sort of the mantra.
So I think you nailed it down. You nailed it down to A, supply and demand, right? B, cost to build. C,
Yep.
the impact on the governments, the counties, whether it's the
Yep.
school systems, infrastructure, police department, et cetera. D, septic. I mean, let's face it, utilities, which
Yep.
is huge. And the last part, Brian, bringing the whole picture into place. Okay, we've nailed all those pieces down. I'm going to tell you, it's also debt. The government doesn't want to incur any more debt itself. To do these increases, they've got to increase the debt. To increase the debt, you're going to put more of a tax burden onto the regular consumer. The consumers right now are already fighting some of the taxes that we're paying as a behind
You're
piece,
talking about on a local level?
local and federal level. Doesn't matter, across the board. Because
Well,
Ronald Reagan, yeah,
let's stick to the local level. So, as a local government, the only way to increase revenue is either to increase the population or raise taxes.
right, raise property taxes. And
Or
let's face it,
taxes, yeah.
taxes. I mean, it's nuts. So I think I'm going to take a concept back to Ronald Reagan. You remember who Ronald Reagan was, right? President of the United States, quite a bit back, if you will. But Ronald Reagan said that if our lawmakers, when they want to pass a bill to provide, free cars to everybody in the United States, they have to come up with the way they're going to pay for that. So when they pass a bill to do something, they have to pass the cost, the bill to raise the funds to do it. And Ronald Reagan said if that occurred, we would stop all of the free programs, stop all the craziness that's going on. We'd stop our budget from going through the roof. And he was right on the money because right now it's uncontrollable. So the only way the government can control the situation is to keep interest rates high, to slow down that brake pressure, to understand the theories behind it. And here's the key, and you and I both know this. Baron von Rothschild, right? Remember from the 1500s.
Baron von Rothschild, yeah.
I love that man. I love that man. And he said, "You
He's a
buy
great American,
when."
old Baron
No,
von.
yeah. Well, I think he was French, but anyway, you buy when there's blood on the streets, right? Well, think about it. So housing right now, Brian, is there blood on the streets of housing?
Not
Yes,
even
there
close.
are opportunities for people to buy.
There's not
I
blood on the
believe that.
streets, Tim. That is not an accurate.
Okay, there's not blood on the streets, but I think there's opportunities out there because yes, interest rates are holding a lot of people back from buying homes. Number one, right?
Yeah.
It's expensive to buy. Number two, but the last part, Brian, is they're missing out on the ability to build long-term wealth. And
No,
again,
I'm not. I'm
you know
not
what I mean?
arguing against owning a home. Like we definitely, you and I both agree. I have a son-in-law. I had this conversation with him yesterday, sitting in his living room. He's like, Brian, when is it going to be a good time to buy a house? And I said, honestly, the first, and this is, I know like 4 people that thought they were going to outsmart the market. They were like, we're going to wait for the crash, then we're going to buy a house. When you should buy a house is whenever you could have bought a house, but you decided not to because yesterday was better than today.
Right.
Today's going to be better than tomorrow
Correct.
because house prices are going to go up regardless of interest rates. They're going to go up. So it's just a fact of life. We just have to get used to it. House prices are going to go up for the long term because of what we've just described. And it's just something that you need to deal with. So it is a good time to buy a house. It's not coming from a real estate agent who's going to try to make money. The likelihood of you buying a house from me watching this video is slim to none. So this is honest advice. You're right, Tim. Like it's a good time to buy a house because it is an investment and it is something where it's comparable to rent. It is more than rent, but it's comparable. And when you look at house prices going up over time, you look at the forced savings and the tax write-off, economically it does make sense to buy a house. I'm not making that argument, but I'm feeling the pressure for affordable houses.
Yep, I agree.
And I don't see a solution to that. And I
So,
therefore conclude that there is a conspiracy not to allow more affordable houses and for people to be able to relieve some of this pressure to make the housing market better.
so in my opinion, and I agree with you 100%. I think there is a bit of a conspiracy out there.
We agree 100%, Tim. We should mark
That's a
this
very
day.
scary situation. However, semicolon, however, comma, I think you can make homes affordable by taking additional steps that are a little more unique. And I'm going to go back to 1984. I bought my first house, okay, in Annapolis. Okay, call it what it will, call it what it is. Interest rates are 18% fixed, 30 years. Now, my price of my house was 75,000. So you're going to say, oh, the price of the
It
house.
was more affordable, by the way, even at 18%.
Except I was only making about $21,000 a year. Now, and that was my net. That was not my gross. Okay. After I paid taxes, the whole 9 yards. Remember, Ronald Reagan years, and tax rates were high. Okay. So my point to you is this: look, you know what? You know how I made it work? Real simple. I bought a 2-bedroom, 1-bath Cape Cod. I finished the attic upstairs. I moved upstairs. I'm renting 2 bedrooms out. Yes, housing is going to always be initially a struggle. So you create the solutions. You don't say, don't be a victim, right? I mean, let's call it what it is, right?
Okay, maybe let me reframe what you're saying a little bit. It's maybe just adjusting expectations, adjusting that,
Right.
a 25-year-old who got married is going to be able to afford a 3-bedroom house on an acre. Like maybe that's not going to happen.
No, I think it's doable. Now watch. You ready? Yes, that 25-year-old now watch who
Well,
decides
it's
to
not going to
have
have granite countertops and laminate
no,
floors and
no,
new
but
fixtures. You're not going to be able to buy new construction. You could
correct,
5 years ago or 2 years ago, but you can't today.
but not today. So instead, Brian, okay, let's look at it from the standpoint of, okay, you know what? I buy a home that needs some tender loving care. I buy a home that I'm going to upgrade the bathrooms and the kitchen. I buy a home that I'm going to expand the situation. I buy a home that I'm going to rent 2 bedrooms and the garage out. I buy a home that I'm going to create a secondary income. I buy a home by taking a second job. Brian, don't tell me that there's not a way. There is a way. And
Oh,
that's
there
where
is a way, but people have become accustomed to a certain lifestyle and
correct.
the expectations are that if you make, 80,000 or $100,000 a year, which is a good income, you should be able to buy a nice home. The reality is you probably can't buy a nice home if you make
Well, or
$80,000
the
a year or
reality
even
is
$100,000 a year.
maybe we don't drive around that $600 car payment. Maybe we buy a used car. Maybe we drive, let's face it, Brian, don't tell me if you're making $90,000, you can't buy a house. You can.
You could buy a house, but you can't buy a nice house. And that's everybody's perception of nice is different.
Correct.
And I'm just saying, like, what you can buy is almost, if not completely, 50% less than what you could buy. So what I'm saying is, like, the expectations are what they watched their friends buy 2 years ago, their parents buy 5 years ago, whatever. What you could buy 3 years ago is 50% different than what you can buy today. So that is where it is challenging.
And I'm not going to say it's not challenging, but you know what? I also believe that all we're doing is we're coming back to when, you know what? The journey was not easy. The journey it's gonna be hard. Let's face it. That's why work is called work,
I'll
not
agree with you
play,
on that too,
right?
Tim. I'm going to agree with you on that. I'm going to say
Please,
that for
please.
most
Yeah,
of the past 50 years, people buying a home and people in America had to struggle a little bit, and we
they
haven't
did.
been struggling the same way.
Correct.
And
Correct.
now we're back to that. So, and from that perspective, yes.
And so the last thing I'm going to leave you with, Brian, is this: when we struggle, okay, when we push hard, it's like working out of the gym, right? We feel good at the end of that struggle, right? The same thing, we find that we have satisfied an amazing need, we've accomplished something,
It
and that
builds
tells
character,
me
Tim.
builds huge character. And that's why I firmly believe that although the government right now doesn't want us to buy houses, there are ways to buy houses. You have the focus, right? As you always say to me, you've got to have the fortitude, right? And Brian, you always say, what do? We inspire, we motivate, and then we empower, right? Think about it, man.
I say that every day when I wake up, Tim.
He does.
Inspire, motivate, and empower.
There
I
you
look
go,
myself in the
man.
mirror and say, "You are inspired. You are
I,
motivated. And you are empowered. You're smart and you're good enough, Brian. And people like you."
hey, buddy, there we go. I'm gonna put that on my mirror. I am E. I am E.
I'm
I
good
am
enough. I'm
E.
smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me.
There you go. So, if the government
To
doesn't want you
quote
to buy
Simon,
houses, it doesn't mean that you don't buy a home. It just means you come up with the creative strategies to make it work, Brian, and you don't give up, right?
No, I agree with you on all that. But going back to this conspiracy thing that we started with,
Yeah.
is there going to be anything on the horizon that's going to bring us back to where we were?
Yeah. 2030.
Yeah.
That's when the silver tsunami kicks. You know, everybody begins selling their houses. We see a lot more inventory and people can move up. But here's the deal, Brian. You heard it. People can move up, right? That means you buy your house today. Maybe it's not at your, this level, this size, this nicety. I don't know what you want to call it, but you buy the house here so you can move up to when that silver tsunami does hit. That's the
Yeah.
key. And so that's why I believe that, you know what, don't believe all the hype and all the bullshit and all the TikTok craziness that we see on the marketplace, right? You have to have a focus, you have to have a vision, and you have to have a path. And this is the path. The path is to buy now. We're not going to have a crash, Brian. It's just going to keep rolling, man. It really is.
Amen, brother. We actually agree on everything we've said today, Tim. So that's weird.
24 is going to be a great year, man. I'm
It's gonna be a
excited.
good year. Yes, sir.
Amen to that
All
one.
right. Well, I
All right,
appreciate
brother.
you, Tim.
See you, man.